Welcome everyone to this live session, ARE5 Material Management, which covers the study materials I used for all of my ARE exams, not just one. And I kind of created this session to help people who wanted to figure out sort of all at once what kind of things they need, what kind of textbooks or references they need for the exams instead of spreading it out. Sometimes people, if they can, they'd like to get it all at once, or if you've already started using some textbooks and stuff, you're like, is there anything else out there? So this is sort of a one-stop shop, one-stop reference for everybody. So first we're going to do a really quick icebreaker event. So what I'd like to do for the icebreaker event is in the chat, if everybody could share their name, where they're based. It doesn't have to be super detailed. You can just share the state or the country and what exam you're currently working on. If you're just starting, you can just say just starting, or you could put practice management because that's the exam almost everybody starts with. So just really quickly for the icebreaker, I'd like for everybody to share who they are and what they're working on. And also after you've done that, once people have started putting their information in, say hi to someone working on the same exam, or somebody based in the same area. So we can sort of get to know each other and also, maybe create study groups or accountability partners, study partners. So yeah, let's try that out real quick. Okay, we have Otis from Northern California, who's currently working on PA. Hi, Otis. Ben in Charlotte, who's also currently working on PA. So that's an opportunity there, guys. If you're working on the exam together or maybe within the same timeline, you can, maybe reach out to each other. And you can also, within Zoom, message each other individually. So instead of doing your messages to everyone, it could be independently or just to one person. Hey, Carl, in the Hampton Roads area, go Hampton. And congrats on your CE pass. Oh, Puerto Rico, Pennsylvania. So make sure to reach out to anybody else who's going through the same exam as you, the same process as you, because it can be a long and lonely road. I was really glad to have my study group with me through my process, and different study partners, accountability partners. And yes, the meeting recording will be shared later. So it's not going to be shared today. So I'd like to edit the video a bit for brevity. There was the earlier part where people were waiting. So I prefer to edit the video and then share it out. So it should be available on the 12th. All right. And you guys can continue to share and give each other a shout in the chat. I think we can go ahead and get started with the main session. So the session's main objectives are to share the materials I used to pass my exams and give an idea of the price options available for the materials, as well as going over how I used each material and how I internalized it. I think there's a big difference between just reading something and really knowing it, really knowing the content. And I'll also explain which exam I used each material for. Okay. And after that, we'll do the live Q&A. So if you guys, you can type your questions in the chat, but I'll be answering them all sort of towards the end. So you can grab your pen and paper or your notes app and take notes as we go. All right. Okay. So I have this wonderful dessert buffet here. And this is kind of how I saw the ARE study materials when I first started taking my exams. It could be very much like an all-you-can-eat buffet because there are just so many things that you want to dive into, so many things you can cover, and you don't want to miss anything that might be really good. And you can really overload yourself by trying to get a little bit of everything, or just grab something because you think it might be helpful. And you can overload yourself with more than you could even consume, in terms of textbooks. Some of the textbooks we use are this big, but maybe you don't need that big textbook. There's several references listed in the NCARB reference matrix that I personally didn't touch, didn't buy, didn't even look at. So just keep that in mind, that not everything is required. And that's an additional savings for you in terms of stuff you don't have to buy. So let's get organized. Let's talk about the materials that you can use, the ways to sort of structure your study materials and really get an understanding of how to both purchase materials and use materials, so you're not just sort of all over the place with your exam study materials. Because I know I was just collecting, when I first started, I was just collecting PDFs, all the free resources I could find. And a lot of those turned out to be completely useless. And architecture as a profession is so broad, so wide-ranging, covering so many different topics, that so many things you get could, in theory, be covered by the exams, but a lot of things are not. So it's very important to really get organized and know what's essential so you can study efficiently. And this is Marie Kondo, because I personally love that TV show, and just getting organized and just really focusing on it. For her, it's sparking joy. For me, it's what's actually useful in the exams. So many of you might have seen this before. These are called the RMSM Studio resource types. This is kind of something that I've created, and it's based on the cognitive levels that NCARB themselves uses for the exams. It's broken down into 3 different levels of remember me, understand me, and analyze me. So remember me is sort of the lowest level, and that's just additional or optional reading. You should know what it is when you see it. If somebody brings up the word, you should know what the word means, but it's not required that you know the inner workings of that specific topic or that specific reference. Understand me is something that you should read through at least once and get familiar with the information within that resource. And analyze me is the highest level. So that's something you should be reading through at least twice, sometimes more. An example of that would be sort of the AHPP, Architect's Handbook of Professional Practice. Another example would be the A201, B101, those specific contracts, because those are things that you're supposed to know in depth, in detail for the exams. And if something is mentioned in reference to them, you should maybe be able to pick out what chapter, if not what page, that the question is referencing. And the way that you study these is you're rewriting them, you're diagramming them, highlighting any sketches you do, like for example in CE, really getting an understanding of wall assembly. So that would be something that would be at the analyze me level. Maybe I should just mute the computer. Okay. All right. So first, obviously, we're going to get started with textbooks and ebooks. And these can be the most intense materials that we deal with for the ARE exam. Like I said, some of them can be this big, especially the Architect's Handbook of Professional Practice. That can be a monster that a lot of people are almost afraid of dealing with or scared of dealing with. And so we'll get into that one first. So the Architect's Handbook is a monster of a book. They call it a handbook. It really should be called the Architect's Bible of Professional Practice, just based off of the size and also the level of importance in terms of the practice, professional practice exams specifically. And those are practice management, project management, and construction and evaluation. I was able to get this specific material for free from my office. And if your office does a material reimbursement program, this would be a really good one to get them to pay for, because it's one of the most expensive. If you're getting it brand new, it's around $200. It's also available for rent. And it's also important to note that all the rentals, at least through Amazon, if you're getting their book rentals, those are 3 months or a semester long. So it makes it a lot easier instead of having to keep that book for ever when you're just doing your exams for a year or two. But a quick note on rentals is that I actually ended up buying a book that was supposed to be a rental because I did not send it back on time. So just keep that in mind, that you should try and make sure you send your things back on time before they charge you the full price. And how I studied this book was using two different guides. The first guide is the Wiley guide, which I've shared in the master list. You can check out the link for that there. I read through all the sections that were referenced in the Wiley guide, and then I read it again with the Kevin Greenland guide, and I used the sections he highlighted in red. So once I've read through all of those, you just try and supplement it with additional things that you picked up from your practice exams. And also what I really tried to do with readings from the Architect's Handbook of Professional Practice was to bring it back to what I was doing in the office. So if I'm reading about office organizational structures, then I would try to look at, okay, what is my office organizational structure? If I'm reading about financials, I try and figure out either my project financials or my office financials. So those were some ways that I tried to hammer home what I learned within the texts. And also there are really great references within the ARE 5 community for ways to get a deeper dive into that book, or how people have used it in other ways to pass the exams. That's how I used it. So first reading with Wiley guide. Wiley guide is, it includes more readings, but I found the Kevin Greenland guide to be the most efficient way. But I felt like Wiley guide, since it gave more information, you were able to get more background information. So I used both. You can check them both out and see which one works for you. But I definitely considered this to be an essential text for my practice exams, or practice management exams. So practice management, project management, and construction and evaluation. Okay, next we have the ARE 5 Review Manual Ballast. This is not what the book looked like when I got it. They've done a revamp, a renew. And that's another expensive one. That one's $170. But luckily it is available for rentals. You can use this book for all of your exams, but I would really focus on using it for project management, programming and analysis, PPD and PDD. And the way that I used it for the last two big technical exams is I actually didn't read the entire textbook, because in some aspects it goes way too far in depth on the material. It's not necessary. So what I actually did is I studied the units, at the beginning of each chapter. For the technical sections, they go into the units of measurement. So I actually read those and I studied those and I tried to understand those, especially for the structural equations, because so many things sound similar. The variables are very similar. So I tried to write them down and sort of circle or highlight the ones that were similar, so I'd know which things would go into similar equations. And that's how I did it. I kind of skimmed it for the other stuff, but a lot of it is not required. It goes too deep for structures, in my opinion. And there are other resources like the Grant Adams reference that I feel like covers stuff more generally. So just keep that in mind. PA, I felt it was very helpful, especially in terms of its discussion on town planning and organization, spatial organization. I felt like it was very helpful in terms of explaining those areas. And I would consider it an essential reference for project management. Make sure that you study the project management chapters, issues in terms of schedules, Gantt charts, chart types for project management. It was very good for that. So yeah, so again, this one is 170, but if you want to use it for all of your exams, you definitely can. I would say I didn't use it as, I read it for practice management and construction and evaluation, but I felt like for those exams, other references were more important, such as the AHPP, and for CE, Building Construction Illustrated was like more important than ballast. Okay, So we have the Kaplan ARE 4.0 construction documents and services. So this one is interesting in that it's not really offered anymore. It's not really in print anymore, so you have to sort of buy it used online. And also Kaplan changed their business name to Brightwood, or maybe they were bought by Brightwood, I'm not sure. So you can find it named as Kaplan or as Brightwood, the ARE 4.0 construction documents and services. And I use this mainly as a reference for CE. And you see that the price is $14. And like I said, you can mostly find it used. But here's the thing, since it's not in print anymore, it's harder to find. So the price is low, but there's fewer versions of this book available out there. And I found it to be a very helpful resource because the actual focus is on the details of the construction documentation, and it's not repeating the same text and language that other references are using. I call it the ARE echo chamber, where each text is copying another specific reference text. Like, for example, you'll find multiple places copying the exact same language as the AHPP. So what I liked about this is that it was giving different information and not just copying another reference. Oh, and this one also has another companion document that gives case studies. So if you want to get that as well, you can. I looked at it, but I didn't use it as much as I used this specific book. And again, I used it for CE. Okay, next up, we have Building Construction Illustrated by Frank Ching. And this one is relatively cheaper, and they keep coming out with newer versions, newer editions of this book, which is really great. And that's why I don't reference the page number so much, because I think at this point there's 3 different editions of this book out right now. But what I mainly used this book for was the CE exam. And the thing I tried to do with this book is I tried to copy the illustrations, really read in depth on the chapters regarding wall assemblies, roof, flooring, foundations. Those what I consider to be the essential sections of this book. And what I really tried to do is I'd see something that I felt like would be relevant to the exam, and then I tried to draw that diagram. Yeah, so this is what I would consider to be an essential reference for CE. And another note for this is that I would try to get started with it early. I wouldn't leave it till last minute. Don't start doing this book, you know, a week or 2 before your exams. Make sure you're starting it at the very beginning, so you have enough time to get through everything. If you decide you want to start drawing stuff, that's something that you're going to have to be doing throughout your study period for that exam. The ballast practice exams, I would say before ELIF's exams came out and before Walking the ARE came out, this was one of the most complex and difficult practice exams that was available out there. And it's still difficult. And the thing about it is that the way that the answers are written, a lot of people still argue about the answers, whether or not they're correct or not, or if they could be interpreted differently. But on the whole, I think that these are very challenging questions that can be very helpful for people who are studying for their exams. So you can use these for all exams, but I mainly use them for project management, project planning and design, CE, and PA. I did use them for PDD, but I found that ELIF's exams, the ARE questions, were more helpful for me for PDD. Again, like I said, the answers can be a bit subjective. So I mainly use them in PDD using my practice question process, which you can find the link for on YouTube, or I might drop it down in the chat in just a second. But basically, if you go to my YouTube channel and you find the practice questions process video, I show how I use practice questions to find additional topics to study for. So I'm like, okay, what is this topic? Let me find 3 references that deal with it or explain it. And that's what I tried to do with this. A good rule of thumb for all exams is that you should try, in as much as possible, to make sure there is no topic that you have not read about or seen. You might not have memorized everything about it, but if you look at something, you don't want it to say, oh, I don't know what this is at all. So that's a very important concept for me, especially as I got deeper into the technical exams, that I was sort of familiar with everything. So if there was something that was obviously wrong, I could just disqualify it on the exams. Okay, and next we'll move into the Site Planning and Design Handbook. This was kind of a nifty little book. I didn't use a big portion of it. Again, this was one of the books where I saw that there were some sections that were useful in terms of the specific practice questions I was doing, but I would not say that the entirety of this book is required. You know, if you can find it for cheaper, if you can find it used, I'd recommend doing that. The purchase price is around $60, and I mainly used it for PA. So if you're okay with shelling out $60 for a book that you're only going to use a couple of chapters for one exam, then, you know, go for it. But if you can find it used or find it from somebody else, then I'd recommend doing that. Okay, Sun, Wind, and Light is interesting because I feel like with my experience, I didn't need this book as much. I'm a lead green associate, and at some point, like a crazy person, I decided in the middle of my exams that I'd also sit for my lead green associate exam. And I felt a lot of the principles in terms of sustainability, lighting design, indoor air quality design, all those different aspects, solar, were touched on while I was studying for my lead exam. So I felt like this was helpful, but I kind of knew a lot of the stuff already. And I feel like a lot of the stuff we learn in studio in terms of sustainability is kind of like common knowledge. And this is more of the application of that knowledge. And the way that this book is written is also very confusing for people, because the idea with this book is that you would apply it to a specific project, not just use it as a reference text in general for an exam. So it can be very confusing on how to use this. I go more in depth on my in my blog post on how to use this textbook. I would find it helpful if you haven't sat for any lead exams recently, or you feel like you don't know a lot about sustainability, to do a deep dive on this. But for me, it wasn't as helpful. It was really more of a refresher. And this was specifically used for the programming and analysis exam. And now we're going into Building Codes Illustrated. So this was a very helpful one for the 3 technical exams, PA, PPD, and PDD. And this, I would say, is another essential reference. And this can be used in tandem with UpCodes or the ICC website to help explain concepts within the codes with visual language. If you consider yourself to be a very visual learner, then I would say this is an essential reference for you for the technical exams, because the codes can be very language heavy, that can be very conditional. So if, then, those kinds of things. So a book like this that shows that in diagram form or written form is very helpful. Yeah, this I think it's another one of those Francis D.K. Ching books where they've been consistently releasing new versions. What I liked about the version that I had was that the code chapters and the book chapters were the same. I felt like that was very good and very helpful. And the sections of this book that you will study will vary based off of which exam you're taking. So I would say that you should check out my blog posts for each of these exams as you go through them, and you'll find the sections of the book you should be checking for. But like I said, this is a companion to reading the International Code Council website, the IBC or UpCodes websites. You should be reading the code itself. That is something you should be doing. But if you need something to help you understand what the code is actually saying and what it means in a building, this is definitely an important reference. Okay, we have Problem Seeking, an architectural programming primer. This I would consider to be, I would say it's important for the programming and analysis exam. However, it can be a bit confusing as you're reading it. And I mostly say that because all the different concepts can start to meld together, because there can be very small differences between the concepts. So what I found was very useful for this book was diagramming the concepts, and also just trying to, again, apply these principles to the projects I was working on or the projects I'd done in the past. Like, okay, what type of circulation method I was using, or if they had any worksheets or activities, to try and do it as if I was doing a real building. And I could do it with this. I couldn't do it with Sun, Wind, and Light. I tried, but it was just so many different levels for Sun, Wind, and Light. So I would say if you have any examples of like tables within this book, you should try and fill them out yourself, and that'll see how you should be using it, or using your own projects as reference for it. Okay, and here we have the NCARB reference matrix, which isn't really much of a textbook, but it is an essential reference. Sometimes it can be an example of what you could do, not what you have to read. But the way that I use it is I compared the references discussed in the ARE 5 community with the ones that were listed in this matrix. Like if it was not referenced in either, then I'm not buying it. And not all references listed here are essential to passing the exam. The NCARB reference matrix is the document that's used to create the exam, not necessarily to study for the exam. So it's a weird difference, but it's a difference. So if you see a reference show up here in the reference matrix and in the community multiple times, then you should definitely check it out, definitely be using it. Okay, and this is something that you would specifically use for PA. This is the Secretary of the Interior Standards for the Treatment of Historic Properties. I found this to be very helpful. I really only read the beginning sections with very baseline introductions for the different treatment methods. So it's really more about the treatment methods and their definitions when you'd be using each one, and not about the details of, oh, this is what you should be doing with stone. You know, so that's an important distinction to remember, and it'll prevent you, if you're a history fan like me, a history nerd like me, then you can get very deep in the weeds with this material. So I'd recommend just focus on difference between like rehabilitation, renovation. If you can clearly say these are the differences between these different treatment methods, then you'll be in good shape. And there's also, if you check in the master material list, I've also provided a Quizlet card deck that will help you run through these concepts and become very familiar with it. So by the time you enter the exams, this should be second knowledge. So this is the initial reference. And once you've read through it and you get an understanding, then you can go to the Quizlet deck and actually test yourself, because it's the difference between learning material and practicing material. You can't practice something you don't know yet. So you need to read it first to know it, and then practice it with the flashcards. And if my voice is sounding a little bit froggy, I apologize. Okay, next we have the Architect Studio Companion. This one I got for PPD and PDD. It's an essential reference for understanding mechanical systems within buildings. That's what I mainly use it for. And it provides very helpful diagrams, and it provides a lot of tables that can help you understand the differences between the different systems in the smallest levels. Like, is it using a fan? Is it not using a fan? Is it active, passive? All these different concepts, and helping compare systems, I feel like, is its greatest strength. It has a lot of tables, but it has so many tables, and those tables are so large, I really would not try to memorize them. You would go crazy with all those little dots and all those different columns. It covers too much within one table, and there are so many tables. I don't find it helpful to memorize the tables themselves. I find it more helpful to practice drawing the diagrams for each of the mechanical systems, and understanding the structure of the system, what comes first, you know, what types of elements are in each type of mechanical system. that for me is more helpful than trying to memorize an individual table, because if you get one thing in the wrong column, then it's not helpful for you. There are other references with tables that you can use that I feel like are more essential. This is not one of them. But I feel like this was most helpful in PPD specifically, project planning and design. I found it to be most helpful specifically within that exam, but I did use it for PDD as well. Heating, cooling, and lighting is another one that was helpful for PPD. Essentially with this book, it goes through different heating methods, cooling methods, both passive and active, and its discussion of the science of heating systems, I feel like was very helpful, and knowing some of the equations behind it is also very helpful. So it covers a different, the same topic, but in a different way than MEEB. So I would consider this to be another essential element for PPD and PDD, but especially PPD. And this is another one of those that if you can get your office to pay for it, I recommend that you definitely would, because this one's like $120. So these textbooks can be pretty pricey. And I hope that seeing all these prices sort of upfront doesn't discourage you. I think you should just take it as a notice that you should be organizing so that you have enough cash flow throughout the exam process, that you don't get discouraged. One of the things that I remember thinking as I was starting to study for the exam is I don't want finances to be a reason why I stop. Like, let almost anything else, let fails be a reason that I stop, but don't let money be the reason that I stop. So basically, as soon as I started the study process, I started budgeting every single month to take a certain amount of money out of my paycheck. I can give you the exact numbers. I was trying to take out around $75 per paycheck every 2 weeks, and specifically set it aside for the exam. So that helped pay for the exams and for the materials that my office wasn't covering. And I started doing that several months before I took my first exam. So as I was studying and taking each exam, and also my office was reimbursing me for the exams that I passed. So I was able to maintain enough money to keep me going as I progressed. So just keep that in mind. Just don't see it as an obstacle, or just see it as an obstacle that you just have to overcome or get over. And you can do that with planning. It's not impossible to do. Okay, so this one's a little cheaper. The 2018 IBC, this is just the textbook version or the physical version of it. Or some people don't always have Wi-Fi all the time. So even if you want a digital version and you want that digital version to be accessible, no matter where you are, maybe you don't have good network in some parts of your town or your house. So that's kind of why I got this material, because I was like, okay, I don't always want to have to be online, so I can access upcodes or ICC. So let me get the Kindle version so I can always have it on my phone for reference. And that's another thing that I did sometimes if I wanted to really focus in on something, is I turned my Wi-Fi off so that I could just be 100% in the zone, not get distracted with social media, Facebook, those kinds of things. You can just use upcodes, but this is another option for you. Okay, and here we have the ballast practice problems. So this is another example of those ballast problems that you use kind of like the ballast practice exams, or at least I did. So it's just an additional set of practice questions. So I did use this for PPD and PDD. So it's just, if you're one of those people who feels like you need a lot of different practice problems to really gauge your knowledge, then that's what these are for. So a lot of people are like, okay, I took this one exam, am I ready? It's like, no, you gotta check it against multiple different practice exams. Of course, none of them are going to replicate the exam exactly, but being able to check against a lot of different exams will really let you know if you're ready or not. And it does contain practice problems for all 6 exams, so do keep that in mind. I mainly got it for PPD and PDD, but you can use it for all 6 exams. It includes all 6. Okay, and now this is another one of those Bible books. So this one is Mechanical and Electrical Equipment for Buildings. It's also known as MEEB. And this is another one that is quite a shocking price tag. But it makes sense because it is huge. For this book, I mainly used it for the 2 big technical exams. I would say this is absolutely an essential reference for the exams, and it really goes into mechanical systems in depth in talking about different ones, and also with electrical equipment. I find it to be very helpful in explaining those concepts. And if you're not very familiar with electrical systems, I wasn't when I started the exams, this is a very valuable material. This material is one of the ones that is helpful if you're trying to avoid a topic. And what I mean is, some of us have topics we're very strong in, and we tend to gravitate towards those topics. Like I know about sustainability, so I would like to read about sustainability and take tests about sustainability because I know it. But MEEB challenged me in terms of a lot of stuff that I didn't know and I had been avoiding, and I really needed to sort of hammer home and get those weaknesses in mechanical and electrical systems. So this was really an essential reference for me. And the diagrams I would then take and redraw them in my sketchbook. So this is another one that you have to start early so that you have enough time to get through all of the material. A lot of chapters covered, and it depends on which exam you're taking. And I think I shared the critical diagrams from this book in my blog post as well. So that's all the textbooks with the exams. Maybe you think it was a lot, maybe you don't think it was a lot. For me, it wasn't as intense just because I was giving myself about 2 months to study for each exam. So I would have 2 months with 1 set of books, then move on, and a lot of books can work for multiple exams, so it wasn't as overwhelming. But also, if you know that you want to get all these books at once, you now have a master material list, so you can go and do that and just have them in advance and not have to worry about shipping times, because that is something I had to keep in mind when I was studying, that, okay, let me start with this textbook because Amazon hasn't sent me that other one yet. So maybe that would be more convenient for you. Just a reminder again that rental prices for these books are all for 3 months or 1 semester. So make sure that you send them back after that period of time. Otherwise, they will charge you, like they charged me. I think it was Architect Studio Companion, yes, which I became a proud owner of after 3 months. Okay, next we'll go into websites and study guides. I won't go into too much depth here because all the sections on the ARE 5 community have been listed in the master material list, and otherwise I'd just be rereading somebody else's ARE community post, which doesn't make a lot of sense. So I've included all of the ARE 5 community posts listed within the master material list. You can go and grab it there, and I've dropped it in the chat. So, and I'll drop it again for anyone who's joined since. But let me first talk about Clockify. So this, I think, was really key for me in passing my exams, and it was completely free. I know I talk about Clockify like they pay me, but they don't. It's completely free. And what it allowed me to do was set study goals for my study hours. And I think I tried to get around 100 hours per exam. For the 2 technical exams, it was a bit more just because of the quantity of information that had to be absorbed. But essentially, it allows you to track all of your study materials, all your study hours. So I would basically write, okay, I'm doing AHPP, this chapter, this amount of time. And it digitizes all that for you. It tracks it all for you. And it compiles it all automatically. So I don't have to go back into Excel and do any calculations after the fact. It'll create the graphs, and I'll also see how much progress I'm making per week. So you can see here how it gives the different tasks and the status of the task, so you can see how many hours it's tracked so far, based off of how many hours you're supposed to be doing. And it's a really great way to check your progress. And one other aspect of it that I like is that it lets you see how much time you're using on a specific material, so you know if you need to move on. One thing when I first started studying that was wrong to do is I was just reading and reading and reading the same material, but I felt like I was progressing because I was reading a lot. But that's not the same thing as reading what I'm supposed to be reading and then moving on to the next relevant material. So Clockify is very helpful for that. And like I said, with the NCARB ARE5 community, I've included all the posts that I used in the master list. Some posts are not included because NCARB did a purge at some point, I think around when they switched to their new system. They did a purge of a lot of the old posts. So it's not that I don't have the links, it's that NCARB removed those links or removed those posts when they refreshed their system. But all the ones I could find are there. So the best things about the ARE5 community is that it allows you to search by exam for specific questions. And I like that it gets that in depth for individual exams. And it's also moderated by NCARB employees and test prep providers. So it's not just NCARB people. I think Kevin Greenling is in there pretty often. Gang Chen is in there pretty often. Lots of different course content providers are in there answering questions, along with NCARB professionals. And it's also great for finding recent stories about your passes or about passes and fails. And the recent is important because sometimes you feel like, oh, these tests are impossible. Nobody can be passing them. But then you're still like, okay, somebody passed it last week, so I can do it, you know? If they can do it, I can do it. And it's also great for study material recommendations. If you want more detail than what you've gotten out of this session, you can definitely head over there and see other people's perspectives based off of their specific study methods. I'm fine with lots of reading. I'm a reader by nature. I have about 3 books that I'm reading right now that my exams are over. But maybe you're not a reader. Maybe you really need a lot of audiovisual content. And so other people can recommend stuff in that direction. So it really depends on the person. Okay, now to talk quickly about flashcards. All of my flashcards are located in Quizlet. I find it to be a waste of time to write my own flashcards, just because if it's already existing out there, I don't need to repeat it. It's a very portable method. And also you can use all the flashcards created by the people who've taken the exam before you. For me, I consider writing new flashcards when these flashcards already exist to be busy work. I consider it to be procrastination because I'm taking that time retyping information that I could be using to learn new information. And I think also because I type so fast, I don't retain memory if I'm typing something again. I have a little bit more memory when it comes to writing, but even that, with how many terms you would be making flashcards of, like some flashcard decks can be 50 to 100. Are you really remembering each of the 100 words that you wrote? Absolutely not. So for me, it makes more sense to just use the flashcard decks that already exist. And if it doesn't exist, then I make my own deck. And the great thing about Quizlet also is it allows multiple methods of learning. So you have just flashcard method where you're just reading through it like a regular flashcard. Learn allows you to read, learn, and then if you didn't actually learn it, then you can study it again. Write is sort of the next level where it's not just sort of guessing it. You actually have to literally write the term out in full. This one I used specifically for the financial equation decks or any equations. So structural equations are included as well, but especially financial, I found this to be useful, where I don't consider myself to have learned a term or a definition until I can rewrite it exactly as it is on the card. And that helps make sure I'm not just sort of pretending I know. I have to know exactly word for word variable for variable, what the correct answer is. And these flashcard decks were used for all of my exams. I've listed them again in the master list, so you can check for my list there. And one thing that I did, oh, and you can also do tests and spelling. This is great for creating sort of, you know, a basic practice test if you need to with these specific terms. Something that we did that was fun within my study group is using the play function. So we used these games to see who could get the highest score. And that was a fun way to study within the study group. So it made it less of just sort of the boring practice questions. Okay. And these are the flashcard topics. So like I said, the links to all of these are provided within the master list. They cover quite a lot of topics, and you'll probably find even more topics as you search Quizlet. I'm sure people have created more decks since I've finished my exams. But the ones that I found really critical are the financial equations deck, as well as the targets. The targets are helpful because it's not just saying, okay, yes, this is profit margin. It's also saying this is the profit margin you should be reaching. And the interesting thing about this deck is that I would learn these targets, and then I discuss them with my my project manager or my office manager to see if they agreed. And a lot of them were like, why would you use this number as a benchmark, or like this as your profit margin? This is ridiculous. Nobody does this in the real world. So it's another opportunity to learn based off of what's done in the field or what's done within your office. And another useful deck was the CSI divisions deck. And I actually used this deck instead of reading the CSI project manual, because this is really the level that you need to know for these exams. You don't need to go any deeper than this, really. And the other way that you would study is by reading specifications that you can either find within your office or just by Googling. But other than that, I didn't need to purchase the CSI project manual. And I mentioned it because I know it's listed within the reference matrix. And I'd mentioned that historic preservation standards deck, so you can grab that there. And also the ADA bathrooms and door hardware decks were also very helpful for the technical exams, and IBC and fire codes as well. So all the ADA stuff I think was also very, very critical for the exam, because ADA diagrams can be confusing and they can change based off of different conditions. So it's important to be able to test yourself on that before you go into prometric, or I guess it is now. Okay, so next we have contracts. Oh, the name of the clock time record. Okay, so that's Clockify. So yeah, so that's a really great one. It's actually supposed to be used for project management, but I've repurposed it into using it for exam hour tracking. So you're tracking your hours just like you're doing a timesheet at work. Essentially, it works the same way. So I've used the Area 5 reference matrix for this because I found it to more or less hold true based off of my exams. So these are the contracts used for the Area 5 exams across all 6 exams. So as you can see, only the PCM, PJM, and CE exams really reference the contracts. The other 3 exams don't really talk about them at all. I think just an understanding of the architect's role, maybe, but they're not really relevant. I haven't seen anything relevant to that on those 3 exams. So PCM is actually very simple. It's literally just the B101 and the C401 C401 contracts. And just knowing those ones in depth, I feel like is very critical. And the great way to study for contracts that you can do while you're working is going through the Ship Harden lectures. He doesn't have a lecture for all of the contracts, but I believe the B101 and the A201, just going through those and hearing him give his experiences with dealing with those contracts or those sections of the contract was extremely helpful, and I could listen to it in the background while I was working. And it was a great way to get my hours in, even though I was still technically working. So if maybe I'm supposed to be getting 3 hours of studying done that day, if I'm listening to Ship Hardened for 2 hours, then I only have 1 hour left to do when I get home. So it's kind of a cheat, and I really like it. CE requires covering quite a few contracts, and it deals with a lot of the construction documentation contracts, like change order, well, technically not contracts, but construction documentation such as change orders, certificates for payment, continuation sheets. So all of those have to be covered within CE. And what I did for those ones was printing them out and reading through them or trying to fill them out myself. That was something I especially did for the G series contracts. And I was also lucky here in that in one of my previous jobs, I did a lot of construction documentation and contract administration for construction phases of projects. So I was already pretty familiar with this. It was really just trying to make sure that I understood it as per the AIA's requirements, because these documents, even though they're standard contracts, different companies can take them and customize them according to their own firm standards. So it's very important that even if you have seen these documents before, even if your firm is using client contract, client agreements, they might not actually look like this. So that's why it's still critical to read each of these and understand them in depth, because you're being tested based off of these contracts, not a general form of contract similar to this. It's this contract. And for project management and practice management, I really found the Young Architect Academy contract course to be very helpful. Sort of going in, kind of like Ship Hardened, going in depth on each of the contracts and when they should be used. And I really consider contracts to be at an analyze me level. So we were talking about the different resource types, analyze me being the highest level, where you're going through and really sketching, diagramming, highlighting. And for the contracts, I also rewrote the contracts in my own words, which took up a lot of paper, but it was sort of like a Cliff Notes in a way where it's translating it into Rama speak. So you can understand it based off of your own understanding of the term, kind of like Ship Hardened. Okay, so for practice exams, I'm gonna go over them kind of quickly because we actually don't have that much time left. But like I was saying, having lots of different practice questions to go through allows you to really make sure that you know your stuff. And I'd mentioned the practice question process video on YouTube. That really explains my process for going through. One of the first practice question sets that I got was the designer hacks, because it's a very basic level of question, but just because it's basic doesn't mean it's not helpful. It's like, if I can't do designer hacks questions, then I don't have any reason to be buying the walking the ARE exam. Because if I can't get that basic level, then I need to study way, way more so that I know enough to go into the more difficult exams. So here's some of the practice question formats or providers. So the Ballast practice exams, practice problems are available. The Brightwood practice problems are available. I have the Gang Chen mock exam listed here as an option. I did not use it. I think we had a copy of it available in my office, but I didn't actually use it for my exams. It was just available. I have heard people speak highly of it, but not enough people that I felt like it was required for me to use it. And Hyperfine is interesting in that it's kind of a course, kind of a practice question at the same time. I kind of treat it more as a course. So these are some options out there for practice questions. And for audio video materials, like I said, I'm not as much of an audio video person, but these are some of the materials I used. I use the Ship Hardened lectures, as I mentioned before, for contracts. And I also created my own YouTube playlists. These are two of the ones I have, CE and PA. They're available completely for free. All these audio and video materials, are available for free. And basically what I did is I used my practice question process to create these playlists, because each time I would find a topic I didn't know about, I would go and search for it and learn about it. And I would use YouTube as that reference. So like you see here, For slurry walls, for example, I was trying to find out, okay, what is that about? How does it actually look in the real world? So YouTube is a very good reference for finding out how things look in the real world. So not just a quick drawing or sketch or diagram, an actual video of it, of maybe somebody doing that construction method using that specific material, how that material is created, how that material is tested. All that can be done through YouTube. And I've already created my playlist. If you want to create your own playlist using my practice question process, go for it, feel free. Like I said, these videos are completely for free and you can check them out whenever. This was kind of I call it my personal Amber Books, since Amber Books is very video based and animation based. So I kind of compiled my own videos to help me learn. And I have them for CE, PA, PPD, and PDD is a mega list. I think there's like almost 300 videos on that one. So make sure that you check that one out as well. Yeah, and I feel like the Grant Adams lectures were very helpful for the technical exams. I found these later on. I really wish I'd found it when I first took construction and evaluation. This is another one of those references that you have to start early in the process for CE, so that you make sure that you can get all the content, because it's a lot of content. And this is another one of those ones that you can listen to as you work, so that you can get some studying in before work is over. Maybe you can't do that and you have to study, or you have to listen to videos separate from working, but I was able to do it with these ones in the background. And that's also how I did my YouTube playlist. I tried to find videos that I could listen to while I was working as well. That was my goal. I wasn't always able to achieve it, but that was what I was trying to do. Especially because at the time I was doing a lot of commuting. So I wanted to be able to, listen and work at the same time, or drive and work, or drive and study at the same time. And I mentioned my practice question process video before, so you can find that also on my YouTube channel. Okay, now quickly on online courses. I'll speak on these three, because these are the three that I used. All of these were self-paced courses with Pluralsight, Hyperfine, and the Young Architect Academy courses. I believe I used Pluralsight for all my exams, Hyperfine for all of my exams, and Young Architect Academy, I believe I used for the first 3 exams: practice management, project management, and construction and evaluation. And those were very helpful for that. Hyperfine, the way I studied it, it comes as an ebook, but the way I studied it kind of in 2 ways. I allowed myself to have it both as a digital version, and I would mark up the digital version on my Kindle. And I also printed them out. I know, save the trees. But the way that I also studied it was like filling it out like an actual workbook, and also making notes, all those other things. And I'd have folders. So basically, I'd punch the exercises and put them in a folder so that I could go through them easily that way. So it's up to you if you want to do it digitally, if you want to do it physically. You can do either. I did both. And that was also to allow flexibility. So if I wanted to study Hyperfine on the go, I could. And also Pluralsight courses. So I started using those early on in my exam process, and I mainly use them for the beginning of my exams to get an overview. So basically for the first week of each exam that I'd studied for, I'd do Pluralsight for about 3 hours until I got through the whole course, and try to get through the entire course in 1 week. So I'd get an overview of all the topics within that course. And the reason that I did that was also to make sure that, like I said, in terms of no topics being unknown to me. So I wanted to make sure that all these topics I was able to know about and talk about and read about and be like, okay, I've seen this before, let me go and learn some more. So that's how I use Pluralsight. Hyperfine I tried to use as per his timeline, or if he says he's going to do it for a week, then I do it for a week. So I try to fill it within that time. And for PPD and PDD, I also did the 10-week. I scheduled my exam after 10 weeks so I could do the whole thing in 10 weeks. I didn't pass PDD doing it that way. I kind of wish I had done PPD first and then done PDD afterward, but it's okay. I passed eventually, so it's fine, but you can do whichever timing you feel works for you. Just want to share that so you guys are aware. And Young Architect Academy, I would just do regularly every day, or several hours a day until I finished it. It's also another one of the, I would say all of these you should start early. All online courses you should start early, so you have enough time to get through all of the content. Don't try and do a whole online course the week before your exam. It's not a good way to retain information because they go through quite a lot. Okay, all right, so that more or less sums up the materials I wanted to share with you. Yeah, and also I wanted to share, if you're interested in getting more knowledge or more coaching as you're starting your exams, I have a new online course that I'm starting up, the PCM project, which is going to be a detailed study plan for the ARE 5 practice management exam. So it's specifically for people who are working full-time and trying to beat overwhelm as they take their exams. I can also share the link to that in the comments or in the chat. So what you'll get in this course are daily readings based on the materials that I use to pass this exam, structured based off of the times and calendar that I use to help pass practice management on my first try. There'll also be live group study sessions, which provide a platform to ask questions, as well as activities that you can incorporate into your job. Like I was saying, with the financial ratios and financial concepts, you're taking them and you're taking those concepts and asking your mentors, asking your project managers, so they know what you're learning and can help you with your learning process. And also creating detailed and personalized study plans that actually work for you and your working schedule. And there'll also be interactive downloads and worksheets. So I'll put the link to that in the chat as well. And now we have question and answer time. So anybody have any questions, comments, concerns? I know we went a little bit over time. Sorry about that, guys. Hey, Jen, no, I don't have a class yet for PPD. Right now, I'm just launching it for practice management, just because I'm trying to take the exams sort of one at a time. I'm planning to get to PPD soon, but for now, it's just starting with practice management. Thanks for the question, though. Any other questions? Okay, the course is $497, but it's over 6 weeks, and right now there's currently early bird pricing. You can find more details at the link, but the early bird pricing is $457 instead of $497. So it's a saving of about, I think it's about 10% or 20%, somewhere in there. And do I have any books that you planned? Do you have any books that you plan to lend or sell? So actually, when I finished all of my exams, I actually donated all of my textbooks to my alma mater, Hampton University. I actually donated all of my books to my school so the students could use them to start studying for their exams. Okay, how long did it take to study for PCM? And how long apart did you do the exam? So PCM, I studied about 100 hours, which translated into about 2 months of real studying. I had a period of time before I scheduled my exam where I was kind of studying, kind of gathering resources, but I wasn't really serious. So I scheduled my exam for 2 months and then went really hard in with all of the materials and methods that I've been mentioning. And how long apart did I do the exam? So about 2 months, 2 months per exam. The only time I didn't follow that was when I had my CE fail, because I had to redo it. So I scheduled the next exam and then I studied in the middle and then took CE again. And same thing with PDD. Oh, like PPD, PDD, I actually studied for 10 weeks for both of those exams, and I passed PDD, passed PPD, failed PDD, then retook PDD after I think about maybe a month of studying again. I think I had a timeline on my website of all my exams. I'll see if I can post that now. But yeah, generally, I recommend that everybody study for at least 100 hours per exam. How long that takes will depend on your work schedule. How fast do you read? That is something also important to remember for people. Not everybody reads at the same speed. And just, the time you have available, what you feel like you can be paying attention to. Maybe you have a lot of things going on after work, so you can maybe only study for 1 hour a day, 2 hours a day. So it's going to take more time, and that's okay. Right, thanks for the question. Anyone else? Yeah, that's basically what I recommend. I also created 100 ARE 100 challenge if you want to check that out as well, just as like another baseline. But yeah, basically recommending about 100 hours per exam. Main focus being textbooks. So you saw that the majority of this presentation was the textbooks, and that's because that's what you're mostly going to focus on, that and the online courses once you get started with them early. Oh, thanks, Jen. Glad you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you everybody for joining. I hope you got something out of this. And I will be sharing a redo, what are they called? You guys know the word, but yeah, so I'll be sharing this presentation again once I edit it a little bit for brevity and cut out that fun bit. And yeah, sure. And make sure you also check out the information about the PCM project. I'm very excited about it. And also, if you have any other questions, feel free to join the ARE Facebook group, ARE Studio Facebook group that I am currently on. And you can also check out the YouTube page. I also answer additional questions, frequently asked questions about the exam on there. So yeah, thanks everybody. If there's no more questions, I'll stop the presentation here. Thanks so much for coming and enjoy the rest of your weekend.